Pomej. Murder on the Nautilus. Sherlock Holmes, The Galactic Cases, Episode 6. Based on the characters created by Sir Arthur Conan Doyle. A Go Audio production. More than 5 hours ago, the Ultimo 1 had landed on TRAPPIST-1G to collect liquid mercury and various rare Earth elements. Additionally, parts of the ship's outer hull were to be inspected for damage and repaired if necessary. Captain Decker impatiently awaited news of the repair's success, as he felt as vulnerable as a sitting duck on land along with the spacecraft. The work was carried out by robots under human supervision. The supervisors were also from Earth, but rarely showed themselves. They either sat high up in crane cabins or deep down in the facility at a video wall that showed them the robot's progress on the spacecraft. The crew was free to pass the time until departure, either on board or by going ashore. TRAPPIST-1G offered an Earth-like atmosphere with a mild climate and a shorter orbit around its sun, a low-mass red dwarf, also known as an ultra-cool dwarf, 40 light-years away from Earth. Its landscape appeared rocky with vast plains bordered by a calm sea. At a distance of 2 kilometers from the landing site lay the coast of this silent ocean. A gentle breeze wafted the typical sea scent into the nostrils of the free roamers, as they jokingly called themselves. Among them were Sherlock Holmes and Dr. Watson, who had reached the sea on foot. In their company was the blonde Laura from accounting, with her blue uniform jacket, yellow miniskirt, and smart black over-the-knee boots with high block heels. She looked like a living anachronism compared to the gentlemen in their old-fashioned suits. "From what I gather about you, Lady Laura, you must be feeling rather homesick for good old Earth." "Wrong," she trilled. "I'm tormented by the desire for a holiday on Mars." Was all he could manage, as he had no suitable reply to that. In an awkward gesture, he looked back towards the landed Ultimo 1, which from this distance loomed like a vast cathedral with its surrounding cranes. "But I miss the screeching seagulls that used to drop their muck bombs on us children back home," she complained. "Though thanks to my agility, I was always able to dodge them." Holmes looked up at the sky, where dark clouds were gathering ominously. Thunder rumbled from the horizon, and the sea was growing restless. "That looks suspiciously like a storm brewing." "Quite right, Mr. Holmes," Laura confirmed. "Now all we're really missing is a sea monster." Within sight of the trio on the beach, the sea suddenly began to foam violently, and something emerged from it, though it couldn't yet be made out clearly. "Your wish seems to be coming true, Lady Laura," assessed Dr. Watson. "There it emerges, quite monstrously, just like Scylla and Charybdis. But I don't wish for a monster at all, rather a radiant hero like Achilles," she gushed, turning up the collar of her uniform jacket whilst meticulously arranging her long blonde hair into the desired wavy style. What had emerged from the foaming waves turned out to be a submarine, which had a streamlined design like a fish. "Oh, a submarine," Dr. Watson recognised immediately. As early as 1776, an American named David Bushnell built the Turtle, a construction of iron and oak. A hatch on a platform of the enormous submarine opened, and 2 men, who appeared very strong, busily climbed out of the opening. They wore black overalls and masks, and hoisted a small boat, a so-called dinghy, into the water, upon which they placed a white-wrapped cargo. Then a third man of large stature in a dark blue uniform joined them, who deserved particular attention. His proud posture revealed self-confidence and his movements energy. His age might have been between 35 and 50 years, estimated Holmes, who could make him out clearly even from afar. The black hair and beard of the same colour made the man, presumably the submarine captain, appear somewhat demonic. Moreover, his eyes were set slightly further apart than those of other people, which allowed him a wider radius of vision. "There's your hero, Lady Laura," remarked Holmes playfully to her, "though he doesn't look particularly radiant, rather somewhat unapproachable." "Ah," she sighed wistfully, A true hero is always unapproachable. That's what makes him so attractive. Dr. Watson seemed to be immediately gripped by jealousy, for he sneered. That figure in the captain's uniform resembles Achilles about as much as I resemble Hippocrates, even though I've taken the Hippocratic oath. No need for jealousy, Dr. Watson, chirped Lura, who seemed to rather enjoy being adored by the doctor. The dinghy, with the 3 men and the cargo, approached quickly. Thanks to the powerful rowing strokes of the 2 masked sailors, the captain's hair was slightly tousled by the wind, which, however, did not detract from his dignified appearance. Really now, I think the poor man looks as if he's suffering from chronic indigestion. Completely uptight, Dr. Watson declared. Just look at his stony expression. It could possibly be due to constipation as well. Meanwhile, the dinghy had already landed on the beach, and the sailors shouldered the white-shrouded load, which, upon closer inspection, turned out to be a wrapped corpse. "Ahoy, Captain!" Holmes greeted the gravely serious man in his smart uniform. "I see you have cause for mourning. Who might it be that you're having laid to rest?" "My navigator, who long before his death rejected a burial at sea. I am honouring his last wish and enabling him to have a grave on land, albeit on foreign shores." "My deepest condolences," said Lura gravely. The captain nodded to her and retrieved 2 spades from the dinghy, then followed the masked men carrying the deceased, who marched inland in unison. Holmes, Dr. Watson and Lura joined the funeral procession at some distance behind. "If I had known I would have to attend a funeral," Lura whispered to Holmes, "I would have dressed entirely in black." "Well, you're not the widow," he whispered back. They stopped at a spot near a rock, where the sailors dug a grave for the 5'3" body at an astonishing pace with their spades. Thanks to their masks, they didn't have to breathe in any dust. Apart from the scraping sounds, silence prevailed, with only the wind whispering. In the blue sky, lit by the central star, 2 of the neighbouring planets passed between white clouds. While the sailors laid the dead man in the grave and covered him with earth, Dr. Watson inquired about the cause of the navigator's death. "Lack of oxygen," was the curt reply from the tall man in the ornate uniform, who appeared rather taciturn and was visibly grief-stricken at that moment. "Could this have been a crude but successful attempt at suffocation?" probed Holmes, who immediately sensed another opportunity to employ his detective skills. Without batting an eyelid, the bearded man admitted, "Yes, his sudden death had already struck me as suspicious. Instead of delivering a eulogy, he took a small laser pistol from his belt and burned the name of the deceased into the rock. John Donkus." After the burial, Holmes and Dr. Watson, who had introduced themselves to the captain on this occasion, shook his hand and expressed their condolences over this sad event. Lura could no longer contain her curiosity and asked why he could speak English so well, noting that his accent was barely noticeable and what had brought him here. "I speak English, French, Latin and German. After breaking with humanity, I first left the country and disappeared into Earth's oceans. Then I left Earth with the help of an alien power, and now wish to unravel the secrets of this planet." He abruptly turned his back on them and strode purposefully back to the beach, followed by his sailors. "You have not yet introduced yourself to us," Holmes objected, having quickly caught up with the tall uniformed man. "I am Captain Nemo, and my ship is called Nautilus." He uttered this sentence in a calm yet penetrating voice. "We have never been on a submarine before," remarked Dr. Watson, who was now also walking alongside the mysterious man, hoping for an invitation. When this did not happen, Sherlock Holmes made an effort. "Would it be impertinent to ask you to take us on a journey through this peculiar sea, Captain Nemo? Although English guests are not my preference, I invite you aboard since you both appear to be of intelligent disposition. I shall take you on my self-constructed colossus into the depths of this ocean." "Are you an engineer?" Dr. Watson wanted to know from him. "Yes, I studied in Paris, London and New York, and now I study unfamiliar nautical territories. However, I must insist upon absolute obedience." "May I come aboard too?" asked Lura, who had quickly squeezed herself between the doctor and Holmes, with a coquettish flutter of her eyelashes. "No," Nemo snapped at her uncharitably. "Women aboard a ship bring bad luck." Now she made a face as if someone had shoved a lemon between her lips. With an alarmingly high level of adrenaline in her blood, she remarked snippily, "Bah! That old rust bucket is far too primitive for me anyway." Before Holmes climbed into the dinghy to join the others, he whispered to her, "I would gladly stay here with you out of solidarity, Lady Lura, but I fear the deceased did not die of natural causes." She nodded in agreement. Yes, that chauvinistic anti-hero might have something to do with his demise. There's one more thing you should know, Mr. Holmes. Although the workers here are delaying the inspection of our ship to earn more money, we'll be gone in 12 hours at the latest. I cannot prevent our departure. You and Dr. Watson must be back by then, or you'll be stuck here for decades. Not exactly rosy prospects, Holmes pondered. But I must take the risk, for I wouldn't have a moment's peace if I had to assume a murderer would escape their just punishment. "Be careful," Lura called after him anxiously. During the crossing to the Nautilus, Sherlock Holmes had already begun to occupy himself with investigating the case. "Tell me, Captain Nemo, was there any quarrel between the navigator and any other members of your crew?" "My crew is trained in maintaining the smooth operations necessary to propel my vessel," Nemo spoke in his characteristically calm manner. "There is no room for discord. Murderers have their peculiar way of concealing their criminal energy, even from the captain," Holmes reasoned. "It takes a thorough detective to confront them with their deeds." Nemo did not react to his guest's self-praise as he descended into his submarine. The gentlemen followed him, showing their amazement at the vessel's size. Through a 10-metre-long corridor, they reached the dining room, where ebony-carved chairs surrounded an elongated table with a snow-white tablecloth, beautifully decorated and lavishly set with wholesome offerings from the sea. Deep-sea fish in aspic, fish liver pâté, mussels in wine sauce, oyster cocktails, smoked shark, even cream made from marine mammal milk, sea anemone confectionery, and pickled sea cucumbers, among other delicacies, beckoned them to sample. Smacked Dr. Watson. "I cannot recall when I last ate something so delicate. This fare is truly fit for angels." "Indeed, a delightful funeral feast," Holmes enthused, after dabbing his mouth with a napkin. "Captain Nemo, under whose flag do you sail, if I may put it that way?" "I am my own master. Here alone tyrants have no power. Here alone only my laws apply. Here alone I am free," Nemo proclaimed mysteriously. "Follow me into my realm of literature." In the library, countless leather-bound books, which must have been of considerable age, stood on copper-plated shelves. Upholstered seats invited readers to peruse the, according to the captain, 12,000 volumes. Among them were valuable first editions by great poets and reference works containing knowledge on all manner of subjects. To Sherlock Holmes's delight, this library also served as a smoking room, where he and Dr. Watson were each offered a cigar by Nemo that appeared to be rolled from gold leaves and was made from a nicotine-rich species of algae. They found it quite exquisite. Through double doors, they entered Nemo's extensive, brightly lit private museum, where he had stored valuable paintings, weapons of all kinds, as well as musical instruments and scores by Beethoven, Mozart, and Haydn. "Oh," marvelled Holmes. "I happen to be an excellent violinist, by the way." "Indeed," Nemo remarked. "Later on, you're welcome to demonstrate your musical prowess on a Stradivarius." In the Great Hall, there were also numerous display cases and showcases full of natural treasures, such as sponges, coelenterates, arthropods, mollusks, and even unknown marine creatures that presumably only existed on TRAPPIST-1G, all laid behind glass for admiration. A collection of inestimable value in a place where hardly anyone would have expected it. And in the middle of the solemnly lit hall stood a fountain, crafted from an exceptionally large giant clamshell. Incredible to find such luxury in an underwater vessel, though Holmes and Dr. Watson already knew that there were far more incredible things in space. Nevertheless, both appeared quite impressed. This man who had invited them onto his submarine must be a very well-read, highly intelligent person. "May I inquire about the propulsion system that drives this mighty vessel through the masses of water?" asked Holmes. "It's simply electricity, thanks to efficient batteries made from sodium chloride combined with mercury, both of which are abundant here," explained Nemo. "That's precisely why your spacecraft landed here in the first place." "You are indeed well informed," Holmes acknowledged Nemo's information. Suddenly, the lights inside the Nautilus went out. A sound was heard, and through a glass panel on a wall of the proud submarine, those present from the dark museum could observe the marine world now illuminated by external spotlights, where an alien fish world revealed itself. An army of colourful sea creatures frolicked in well-formed shoals around the giant vessel. Magnificent specimens of various shapes and sizes swam in precise formation, like an underwater ballet, before the admiring eyes of the guests. After this display, the wall panels closed again and the interior lights came back on. "These magnificent creatures, which I never tire of observing, ensure I never miss the underwater world of my homeland," remarked Nemo with a sweeping gesture. "Don't you miss your navigator?" Holmes inquired at this opportunity. "Who is doing his work now?" "I do," declared the captain, jabbing his thumb at his broad chest. "If you thought he was killed because another crew member wanted to take his position, you were mistaken, Englishman." "Captain Nemo," Dr. Watson addressed him, "what led your ship's doctor to conclude that the navigator had died from oxygen deficiency?" "I don't have a ship's doctor aboard. Instead, I have plenty of medical literature in my extensive library, which you've already had the pleasure of viewing," replied Nemo with a proudly puffed chest. "And it didn't even require consulting one of those clever books to see how John Doncas's blue face with severely protruding eyes pointed to this cause of death." "But you've already admitted that his sudden death seemed suspicious to you," remarked the doctor in a stern tone. "Such a lethal incident has never occurred aboard my ship before. That naturally arouses suspicion in anyone," he defended himself. "At any rate, I can rely on my crew 100%, for no one dares to oppose me or do anything of their own accord that I would not approve of." "Captain, you're needed in the engine room," squawked a voice from a speaker, whereupon Nemo, without apologizing to his guests, immediately set off in that direction. "Tsk," Holmes sniffed disdainfully. His manners leave much to be desired. Clearly not a follower of proper English etiquette. "My dear friend, we have made a grave mistake," whispered Dr. Watson, having grown visibly nervous. "We have voluntarily confined ourselves to an iron prison deep underwater, a tin can, fully aware that we have precious little time left before departing this planet, though the question remains whether we shall ever see the light of its sun again. I see it differently, Watson. There is a repair facility here that spaceships regularly visit. We can also depart from here with one of the upcoming vessels. And regarding the depth of our current situation, do not forget that everything that has submerged must eventually resurface. That's a law of physics. After all, there is plenty of breathing air down here that will rise upward as soon as suitable measures against sinking are implemented. I find our stay here quite pleasant thus far. The captain is certainly not a pleasant fellow, but rather an egocentric loner with a thick skin on his soul and much hatred in his heart," complained Dr. Watson. "But a loner who has realized his dreams," Holmes pointed out. "He constructed the Nautilus, crossed the 7 seas, and now cruises these alien waters. That is quite a remarkable achievement. Holmes, you should bear one thing in mind. We only have 12 hours, the doctor reminded him gruffly. "I haven't forgotten, and I believe that even in such a confined space with this limited time, we shall manage just fine." "As you say, my dear friend, but I estimate the first hour and a half has already passed." "Yes, that hasn't escaped my notice," confirmed Holmes. "Come along, Watson. We shall also make our way to the engine room. Perhaps we'll encounter some members of Nemo's crew whom I can question. Indeed, they encountered a sailor who was carrying a machine part." The man dressed in black, here without a mask, had a dark moustache, was of sturdy build, and appeared to be between 35 and 40 years old. "A word, sailor," Holmes addressed him. "You must have signed up with the Nautilus years ago. How do you find it here on another planet?" "I've seen little of the planet thus far, but the underwater world is far more magnificent than back on Earth," the sailor informed them. "And was there any quarrel between the navigator and any of the crew members?" Holmes now came to his actual question. "There's no quarrelling here. Everything happens exactly as our captain orders, and none of us has ever complained. Excuse me, I have work to do," said the sailor, and vanished in the blink of an eye. "Not very talkative," Dr. Watson observed. "Either he's afraid of his boss, or he's just as taciturn and bitter as him." "I don't consider the sailor to be bitter, Watson. He's someone who takes orders and isn't accustomed to asking questions. Such people aren't particularly forthcoming with information." "But he was taller than the dead man," the doctor noticed. "He could have, for whatever reason, simply suffocated him." "The same applies to the commander of the Nautilus himself," Holmes suspected. "Although I don't believe he would decimate his crew, as he knows full well that he won't be able to recruit new people here anytime soon. Perhaps the navigator wanted to return home and was therefore sent to his death by Nemo," Dr. Watson hissed. "I don't believe that, my friend, for men who sign up for sea duty are usually very keen travellers, restless nomads. I would very much like to take a look at the navigator's cabin." As if on cue, another sailor came along carrying a different machine part, whom Holmes could now ask about it. "The crew's quarters are located at the stern of the Nautilus," readily informed the man, who also sported a moustache. "The navigator had cabin number 13. "Good heavens, an unlucky number!" escaped Dr. Watson, as he wiped his brow with one hand to brush away the beads of sweat emerging from his pores. Without comment, the sailor left the two passengers, and the sharp smell of chlorine crept into their refined English nostrils as they made their way to the stern of the ship. "It's quite clean in here," Holmes noted, scanning the corridor with eagle eyes as he searched for cabin number 13. "One must give the captain credit for that." "Yes, but I'm feeling more and more uneasy by the hour," complained Dr. Watson. "I'm being tormented by rising claustrophobia, especially when I think about the fact that we only have a few hours left until departure." "There's the unlucky cabin, you pessimist," Holmes joked and entered. The cabin turned out to be small and untidy. Several items of clothing lay on the floor. The bunk had no bedding left, and powdered sugar from an overturned tin had scattered across the surface of the small table beside it. "Look at this, Watson." Holmes seemed very interested in the table, or more precisely, in what was scattered on it. "Here in the white sugar, there's a pattern. Tiny dots in rows of 4 stretch from one side to the other, and they end right in front of the bed." Said the doctor. "And what do you deduce from that?" "To be honest, I cannot make head nor tail of it," the detective shook his head. "It could be the imprint of a machine part, although I doubt there is one with such tiny pins. Besides, no one would place it on scattered sugar," Dr. Watson pointed out. "I'm afraid we're just wasting our time here, Holmes. Let's go down to Nemo in the engine room." A short while later, the two had arrived at the engine room, where enormous powerful turbines, fed by the batteries, pounded away in a monotonous rhythm, performing their thunderous work. The thin engineer appeared even more gaunt in his black work clothes, and had an oil-smeared face that expressed unease. Upon seeing the Englishman, he retreated behind one of the turbines like a frightened child. Nemo signalled them to wait, called out an order to the engineer that was acoustically incomprehensible, and then left the engine room. "Come with me to the smoking room," the captain ordered them brusquely. "Don't you ever feel homesick, Captain?" Holmes inquired on their way there. "A longing for people?" "No, I do not know anything like homesickness," claimed Nemo, his eyelids narrowing and his features hardening. "Above all, no longing for the people there." "May I ask," Dr. Watson began cautiously once they had arrived in the salon, "what is the source of that hatred in your eyes, which seems focused on humanity?" My hatred of humanity stems from the loss of my entire family. Everything was taken from me, Nemo confessed, and a tear appeared in the corner of his eye, which he managed to hold back. Slowly, he lit a cigar. Then these alien beings rekindled some hope within me and melted the ice in my heart. We understood each other without many words, and they appreciated my abilities. And they made you this unique offer, added Holmes, who waited in vain for another cigar. In exchange for what service, if I may ask? Counter-service? Repeated Nemo, perplexed, blowing smoke from his mouth in large rings. I serve no one, remember that. Those strangers recognized that immediately. They demanded absolutely nothing from me. Most peculiar, this altruism from an alien species, remarked Dr. Watson. Did these beings arrange to meet with you again? No, why would they? The captain drew himself up to his full, rather imposing height by straightening his spine. I am driven by the urge to explore unknown waters and the yearning for answers to all my questions. And have you found any answers yet? Probed Holmes. Oh yes, but which ones he left unsaid. But you haven't yet been able to answer the question of who deprived the navigator of oxygen, Dr. Watson reminded him. No, I believe it was a suffocation attack during sleep. Nocturnal dyspnoea, explained Nemo, pointing to a shelf in the library before placing his cigar in a bronze ashtray near him. But you, being a doctor, surely know this without having to look it up. Unfortunately, I did not have the opportunity to examine the suffocated man's corpse, Captain. Just as Nemo was about to reply to Dr. Watson, a sailor burst in, reporting in great agitation. Captain, we're under attack. By whom? Nemo could not believe that someone dared to attack him, or rather, his creation, the Nautilus. It appears to be some sort of underwater humanoids unknown to me, the sailor expressed awkwardly. His black overalls seemed a bit too large for him, or he had lost a considerable amount of weight recently. They have been swimming in front of the periscope with peculiar weapons and are now using them to scratch our steel walls. I'll soon knock that out of them, Nemo announced, already excited by the impending battle, and darted out of the salon as if the devil himself were after him. They shouldn't have come here, Dr. Watson grumbled close behind him, deeply concerned that he would have to go down with all hands and never resurface. Daring is part of my personality, Nemo enlightened him, having pushed his way forward to the periscope with a flushed face to catch a glimpse of the attackers. And? Probed Holmes, who stood beside him. What do you see, Captain Nemo? Strange figures, like mermen from our world of legends. Hairless mermen, though. They're carrying weapons that resemble walrus tusks and are waving them about like scimitars. The piercing sound of metal scraping against metal echoed ever louder through the ship's hull. There must be quite a lot of mermen with metal-reinforced walrus tusks trying to make themselves heard in this way, Captain, Holmes needled. To inform you that you are unwelcome here. A man like me doesn't give a damn where he's welcome. He simply fights for his place to live. Nemo snarled in his face, then turned to one of his loyal crew members. Helmsman, hard to port and ready the torpedo. Hard to port, prepare torpedo, repeated the helmsman, equal in height to the captain, whereupon the Nautilus jerked to the left. Fire torpedo, commanded Nemo, who now seemed to be in his element, battling man against defiant nature. Fire torpedo, repeated the helmsman, and the Nautilus gave another violent jolt that nearly knocked Dr. Watson off his feet, which could only mean that a torpedo had left its tube at great speed and was now seeking its target. Tensely, the captain peered through the periscope. The atonal sound of grinding metal had abruptly ceased. That'll teach those fellows not to attack me again, Nemo declared solemnly. Come with me, Englishman. Let's observe the situation together through the viewing window. At once, Holmes and Dr. Watson accompanied the combative captain to his private museum, where the wall panels opened to reveal lifeless figures drifting in the water, who, having lost their weapons, floated through the sea like ghosts. Dr. Watson was the first to speak. These scrawny creatures looked like oversized cave salamanders. completely pale and thin. "And most importantly, dead," Nemo rejoiced bluntly. "As dead as your navigator," Holmes interjected. "But I don't believe these sea creatures had anything to do with his death." "No, their domain is the ocean. They are certainly not capable of coming onto land or into my ship," Nemo stated with absolute certainty. "Let us return to the salon. I want to finish my cigar." "He's a cold fish," Dr. Watson whispered to his friend Holmes. He nodded. "Well, that's the only way he could have become who he is now." In the salon, Nemo sat down on a bench, picked up his still smoking cigar from the ashtray, and took a drag. Where had we left off in our conversation before this brief escapade interrupted us? After a brief moment of reflection, Dr. Watson remembered. "I regret not being able to examine the navigator's corpse. What else can you tell me about its condition, apart from the fact that it had turned blue, Captain?" Nemo blew smoke rings into the air again before deigning to answer. "Externally, the corpse was completely unscathed. However, I did not perform a post-mortem. The cause of death seemed entirely clear to me." "And this has been the only death aboard so far?" Holmes wanted to know. "No. Unfortunately, I lost one of my men in an accident quite some time ago. Back then, we were still in earthly waters. A machine part fell on his head and crushed his skull." This confession was followed by a moment of silence, during which he merely took another draw from his cigar. "But since you've been cruising the seas here on TRAPPIST-1G with your submarine, you haven't had to mourn any of your men?" Holmes sought to clarify. "No, so it can't be the breathing air, otherwise several of us would have already drawn our last breath," Nemo concluded. Before Holmes could ask any further questions, another disturbance occurred. A plump sailor burst in with more bad news. "Captain, the cook is dead in his cabin. He only wanted to lie down for a brief rest." Alarmed, the tall, usually composed man dropped his cigar and hurried out of the salon, closely followed by his guests, who would now have the opportunity to examine the next fatality on board in detail. Through the metre-long corridor, they made their way to the stern of the Nautilus, where the crew quarters were located. In the cramped, rather Spartan cabin number 19 belonging to the cook, all three lined up in front of the deceased's bunk for the post-mortem examination. One could hardly detect any emotion in Nemo's expression. Only for a moment did something akin to regret flicker across his face before he wordlessly left his ship's cook's cabin. Dr. Watson examined the dead man with a professional eye. The deceased lay before him in white underwear on the bed covered with grey sheets, his face blue and eyes protruding. He felt his forehead, which was still warm, and let out a sigh. Once again, death had been quicker. The doctor had been unable to wrest his patient's life from its grasp. "The captain may hate humanity, but he will surely mourn this excellent cook." "From what I make of this fellow," the doctor muttered, "his library surely contains cookbooks, so he can replace this poor chap himself, just as he replaces the ship's doctor with medical books and the navigator with a sextant. Is there any possible cause of death other than suffocation, Watson?" "Hardly, Holmes. This approximately 40-year-old man, 5 foot 3 inches tall, was suffocated, and quite recently at that. However, I cannot find any strangulation marks on his neck or handprints on his jaw. Would you like to perform a post-mortem, Watson?" "Yes, that would be advisable. This corpse is certainly hiding a secret from us." However, when the doctor opened his mouth, he recoiled. "Good Lord! There's a revolting insect inside. It's alive and has crawled down his throat. It appears to have eaten part of his tongue." "How did an animal get into his mouth?" Holmes wondered to himself. "I have no idea," Dr. Watson admitted, bewildered. "Early maggot infestation is definitely out of the question. He's been dead for 2 hours at most. Rigor mortis is already setting in, and we've been on this horror ship for at least 3.5 hours, if not 4.5. Time is running out. After all, we must factor in the time for the return journey, Holmes." "Precisely, though events are now taking quite a dynamic turn," observed Holmes, sounding confident. "Do you remember the pattern in the sugar in the navigator's cabin?" Those were the footprints of the voracious insect. We've come one small step closer to solving the mystery of death aboard this vessel. Speaking of small, the cook was the same height as the navigator. Merely a coincidence? Unknowingly, Dr. Watson shrugged his shoulders. Perhaps, or it could be the preferred size of victims for this species of vermin, if indeed they are responsible for the deaths of both men. Or it's a deliberate placement of the creatures into the throats of the sleeping victims, Holmes concluded incisively. But by whom? Dr. Watson articulated the question that was now tormenting Holmes as well. That's what we need to find out. Either the creature alone is responsible for the death, or it was used as a tool by a perpetrator. I shall confront the captain about this at once, Holmes announced, and left the dead cook's cabin. The Nautilus emerged from the waves of the alien sea like an island formed from a sudden volcanic eruption of dark lava, as the captain's desire for fresh air drove him to the surface. He stood deep in dark thoughts on the bridge, which could only be manned when the submarine was surfaced, as it was located, open at the top, on the boat's tower, bounded towards the bow only by the so-called bulwark, which runs up to chest height and protects the bridge crew from seawater. Above Nemo's troubled head, grey cumulus clouds gathered, obscuring the view of the nearest neighbouring planets. Occasional flashes of lightning cast bright light between them, and a soft rumbling heralded an approaching storm. At this moment, he could have indulged in the notion that he was drifting in a familiar ocean. Faint memories of his encounter with the French professor Pierre Aronnax stirred within him, of shared adventures like the battle against a giant kraken and a shark, the joint expedition to sunken Atlantis, whose ruins they discovered, as well as reaching the South Pole and the whirlpool of the Maelstrom, which the Nautilus had escaped only with great effort and much luck, and thanks to the aid of technology, which he, the great Captain Nemo, believed he mastered so perfectly. Ah, he thought, all that seems as distant as if from a previous life. After a while, Sherlock Holmes also climbed up to continue his investigation. Captain, do you happen to have a vermin problem aboard? No, Nemo exclaimed indignantly, casting him a withering look. Whatever makes you think that, Englishman? Because Dr. Watson found a living insect in the suffocated man's mouth, which had retreated into the body's interior. Unbelievable! This is the first time I've heard of this, gestured the captain, visibly annoyed by this irregularity. Thoughtfully, Holmes massaged his chin. Could it be possible, Captain, that woodlice or arthropods, like those on display in your museum, have crept in unnoticed? I consider that impossible. Nothing easily escapes my keen eyes, even when it comes to small creatures. Nemo dismissed with his characteristic arrogance. We cannot simply dismiss the tiny creature that Dr. Watson spotted in the corpse. Holmes insisted on pursuing this topic further. Therefore, it would be advantageous if we both conducted a thorough inspection. Let's start in the galley, where the cook presumably spent most of his time. Do you think this vermin crawled into his mouth whilst he was sleeping? Asked Nemo, who now seemed to be worried about a pest infestation aboard the Nautilus. That certainly appears to be the case, Holmes agreed with this assumption. Was the navigator also found dead in his bed? Nemo merely nodded dejectedly. Dr. Watson also climbed onto the bridge and exchanged meaningful glances with Holmes. Finally, all three made their way to the galley to search for any woodlice, cockroaches, and other unwelcome stowaways. Captain Nemo opened every drawer, Dr. Watson every hatch, and Sherlock Holmes every container in the meticulously cleaned ship's galley. Despite their thorough search, they found nothing that didn't belong in a well-organised ship's kitchen. Even in the flour, there wasn't the smallest flour beetle, which sometimes appears when flour is left standing for long periods. Nothing here that doesn't belong, Nemo summarised. I need a bit of a pick-me-up. Would you chaps fancy some strong coffee? Actually, I would prefer tea, Dr. Watson chimed in. But I don't want to cause you any trouble. Silently, Nemo personally prepared coffee as black as a moonless night using a modern-looking espresso machine. All three men drank the fragrant liquid from large mugs with handles, feeling inner warmth rising within them. I harvested this variety of coffee on an island here in the sea, which I named Nemo's Isle, he reported proudly. Interesting. Could an insect have possibly made its way onto your ship during that time? Or perhaps several? Holmes immediately deduced potential consequences from this incident. I didn't notice any insects on the island. There were neither mosquitoes, nor flies, nor locusts, nor anything else that resembled an insect. And I am a very observant person, he boasted. Yes, I can believe that, Dr. Watson said, impressed. But what would pollinate the plants then? That's an important point you raise, Englishman, exclaimed Nemo. The pollination could have been carried out by the wind, which blew rather fiercely on my isle. In any case, the culprit is an insect, Holmes insisted, noisily placing his empty mug on the table. I have absolutely no doubt about that anymore. The only remaining questions are where it came from, how it got aboard in the first place, and whether there might be more of this nasty sort hiding in the furthest corners of your ship. So I need a professional pest controller, the captain believed he had realised, angrily striking his flat palm with his fist. Someone who knows exactly where these hideous crawling creatures might be hiding. Not necessarily. Let's first summarise the commonalities between the two deceased. Holmes began with a lengthy exposition, whilst pensively pacing up and down the galley. The crew members who lost their lives aboard were both suffocated in their beds, both male, both originated from Earth, both served under your command, Captain Nemo, and both were exactly 5 feet 3 inches tall. While all this might mean nothing, it gives me much to ponder. The identical height in particular could be of significance. If I understand correctly, I'm supposed to forbid all crew members of this small stature from sleeping, the captain snapped irritably. The few people affected by this won't accept it without mutiny. Holmes shook his head. You mentioned an alien power that helped you and the Nautilus arrive here. May we learn more about this power, Captain Nemo? He raised his eyebrows. Indeed, they were non-human beings whom I encountered on the island of Kebaroa whilst harvesting bananas. When I didn't let their appearance frighten me and immediately recognised their intelligence, they showed me respect, told me they came from the planet Epsilon Eridani, and made me this lucrative offer in Latin, which I logically accepted. I believe anyone would have taken such a unique opportunity to escape their oppressive homeland with all its dreadful fellow humans. Interesting, said Dr. Watson curiously. What did these non-human beings look like, Captain Nemo? You are welcome to marvel at one of them here on board. Nemo surprised them with a grandiose gesture. For they gave me an effigy of themselves, a statue made of pure gold, which stands in my private quarters. Come with me. Intently, Holmes and Dr. Watson followed the captain to his Spartan cabin and marvelled at a 1.6-metre-tall golden statue of a strange, humanoid-looking insect. It had a rather large head with very large eyes, small nostrils, thin-lipped mouth that seemed to smile mischievously, a rather thin neck but a very broad chest plate on a narrow lower body, and stood on 4 legs with hoof-like feet at the bottom. 2 arms with only 2 fingers and a thumb extended upwards as if in blessing, and ended just above the head, which had no antennae, as would normally be found on insects. With his right hand, Nemo stroked the golden body of the being cast in precious metal, while boasting pompously, "A gift worthy of such a great captain. I dare say you've never received such a generous gift, Monsieur Holmes." Sherlock Holmes displayed the typical English coolness, and, without reacting to such provocation, responded with a raised eyebrow. "Are you familiar with Homer's tale of the Trojan War, Captain?" With a mild smile, Nemo affirmed, "Of course you'll find a copy in my library." Dr. Watson slapped his forehead. "Good heavens, the Trojan horse!" "What do you mean?" Nemo hesitated, understood immediately, and removed his hand from the statue. "But this golden statue is completely hollow inside. I made sure of that before installing it. Not because I feared anything threatening within, but to determine whether it was solid gold, which would have naturally multiplied its value. "And the eyes?" inquired Holmes. "The insect that Dr. Watson spotted in the dead cook's mouth could have also found space in one of the eye sockets." Now Nemo firmly grabbed the statue with both hands, turned it upside down and peered inside. "From here, I cannot see whether the eyes are hollow, but the foreign powers representative also gave me a formidable laser pistol, with which I shall be able to solve this mystery." "We're waiting with bated breath for that, Captain," the doctor teased him. Nimbly, Nemo set the statue back on its 4 legs and aimed the weapon's laser beam at its eyes, whereupon the gold quickly liquefied and ran down the lower half of the head in small rivulets, which, grotesquely, made it appear as if the insect was crying. And lo and behold, small eye sockets were revealed, showing a hole at the back. "Aha!" said Holmes, snapping his fingers. "Beware of Greeks bearing gifts. Your benefactors are no better than your fellow men, Captain Nemo. As you can easily imagine, an insect was hidden in each of these small cavities, which first claimed the navigator's life and later the cook's. So we have solved the mysterious deaths, for the representatives of the alien power who gave you this fatal gift are also responsible for their deaths. It appears you must pay tribute to your devious benefactors in the form of your crew, Captain Nemo." "Indeed," Dr. Watson concurred. "I saw in your cook's mouth that this little beast had nibbled on his tongue. It retreated further into the corpse and is presumably consuming it from within." "But why didn't one of these cursed insects attack me?" wondered Nemo, clenching his fists in rage. "After all, I slept right next to their golden nesting place. It would have been logical to take the shortest route to human flesh, which these little creatures obviously feed upon." "Body size must surely play a role here," deduced Holmes, raising his index finger. "You are a tall man, so it's quite possible that the small insect chose a smaller host instead, one who, like your cook, measured only 5'3", just like the statue from which it emerged." "That's exactly confirmed by the choice of the navigator, who was equally small," Dr. Watson deduced. "I think it best," pondered Nemo, "if we bring my cook's corpse ashore immediately and bury it there, whilst the devilish creature still remains within his body." "That's exactly what I was about to suggest," Holmes said with delight. "Then let's not waste any more time. Dive!" Nemo commanded with an energetic voice. Without further delay, the Nautilus submerged, thus escaping the loudly thundering, approaching storm and high waves, and set course back to land at a breathtaking pace, as the guests could observe through the glass panel on the ship's wall. Accompanied by partly phosphorescent shoals of fish and larger marine mammals, whose bulky bodies, equipped with fan-like fins, ensured swift forward movement, the submarine darted through the sea-green masses of water. The 12 hours had not yet passed when Holmes and Dr. Watson finally set foot on solid ground again. The sun had already turned reddish on the horizon, and the participants of the funeral procession cast long shadows on their way to the navigator's grave. The 2 sailors carried the cook's corpse, the captain 2 spades, whilst Holmes and Dr. Watson bore only solemn expressions. After they arrived at the rock that Nemo had marked as John Donker's gravestone, they encountered a surprise, for in front of it lay several yellow flowers arranged into a bouquet, and next to it a crushed insect. "That's the same creature that crawled into the cook's throat," recognised Dr. Watson. "Although it's rather battered, I can identify it without a doubt. That means it was evidently able to free itself from the grave after its hearty feast of human flesh," Holmes observed. "A resilient species. And it was looking for a new victim," Nemo estimated with a grim expression. "Who might have crushed it?" "Hello!" Lura came running towards them, calling out loudly. Out of breath, she arrived at the grave and burst out. "Just imagine, during my walk I found some pretty flowers which I picked to decorate the grave, and when I laid them down here, a disgusting beetle crawled out, which I immediately crushed after letting out a scream, releasing a putrid stench. I hope I haven't done anything wrong." No, Lady Lura, Holmes reassured her. You acted perfectly, for the alien insect force that transferred the captain and the Nautilus here gifted him with a valuable statue that harboured their murderous hellspawn. Indeed, Nemo nodded angrily, and I shall now arrange a cremation for this revolting brood's second victim. The sailors laid the corpse beside John Donker's grave and respectfully stepped back, whereupon Nemo fired his laser pistol, setting the white-shrouded body ablaze. A burning insect promptly fled from within, turning to ash after a metre. The rising smoke reeked of putrid decay. What an irony of fate, Nemo commented on the ghostly proceedings. These alien beings not only gifted me their well-hidden brood, but simultaneously also the weapon with which I can destroy them. These creatures underestimated humanity, Dr. Watson summarized. And, fortunately, they did not possess the gift of precognition, so they could not foresee that our paths would cross on this planet. Indeed, how fortunate to have met you both! Nemo burnt his cook's name into the rock. Jean Bocuse. They all remained motionless for several minutes until the corpse had also crumbled to ashes. The first officer of the Ultimo One, Tornot, joined the mourning group with rather unpleasant news. I regret to inform you that the entire workforce of the factory has gone on strike. Our stay will therefore be extended. Strike? Repeated Nemo, looking briefly perplexed. I'm not familiar with such a thing. It must be something alien. Holmes took the liberty of enlightening him. You seem to have missed something, dear Captain. When sailors in Sunderland wanted to fight against poor working conditions in 1768, they boarded several ships anchored in the harbour and lowered their yards to prevent them from sailing. Hence the word strike. They struck the sails, which represents something akin to mutiny, as the strikers want to fight for higher wages or better working conditions. And furthermore, you'd make a good schoolmaster, Lura interrupted, playfully jabbing him in the side. And besides, he continued undeterred, standing up against injustice is something deeply human. Yes, that makes sense to me, Nemo agreed. I, too, once fought against injustice done to me. Lura nodded and poked Nemo's chest with her finger. And you, dear Captain Nemo, are practically a sort of striker yourself, having broken with humanity. That means you've gone on strike against your fellow human beings, wouldn't you say? I suppose you're right, miss, he agreed. I assume that I destroyed the last of the murderous insects with the laser beam. At the same time, I must confess that I was able to accomplish this thanks to your help, Mr. Holmes. For that, I'll treat you to my cigars. Solemnly, he removed a full case from the inside pocket of his uniform jacket and handed it to Sherlock Holmes, who accepted it with a satisfied expression. Thank you very much, Captain. With every puff, I shall think of you and your proud vessel, the Nautilus, promised the detective, who then assured his friend Watson. And you may share them too, my dear fellow. Then Nemo turned to Tornot. Shall I end this strike for you? I have plenty of weapons on board whose effectiveness the strikers cannot resist. He waved it off. No, thank you for your generous offer, but my superior is already negotiating the matter peacefully. As you wish, Nemo murmured, then bid farewell to everyone in a firm voice. Farewell, and do not forget me, for all my research serves only to make me immortal. For they say each of us dies two deaths, the death of the body and the death in the memory of our fellow humans, when no one speaks of us anymore, and we finally fade into oblivion, as if we had never existed. Wow, said Lura, wrapping her arms around herself. Your words give me goosebumps. I can promise you that in good conscience, Captain Nemo, Holmes reassured him with these words, I shall mention you in a chapter of my memoirs, so that you and your Nautilus will forever remain in the memory of posterity. Satisfied, Nemo and his two sailors made their way back to his impressive creation, the Nautilus, which would henceforth traverse the seas of Trappist-1G. I believe our encounter has somewhat tempered Nemo's unbridled hatred for humanity, Dr. Watson hoped. Instead, his hatred for the insect-like aliens is now likely growing. Holmes observed, whilst contentedly lighting up one of the gifted cigars. You are listening to Pomej, Murder on the Nautilus. Sherlock Holmes, The Galactic Cases, Episode 6. Based on the characters created by Sir Arthur Conan Doyle. A Go Audio production.